Have you ever thought about what a single random day from the past could actually tell us about who we were? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're opening up a kind of time capsule. It's not a box buried in a field, it's a document. The official U.S. congressional record from just one day, October 6, 1972. Let's see what it can tell us about a nation that was really on the edge.
Now, I know what you're thinking. At first glance, it looks pretty dry, right? I mean, it's just pages and pages of dense, formal text. But if you look closer, hidden between the lines of all these official speeches, that's where you find the real stories, the hopes, the fears, the conflicts, the ambitions of a country at a major crossroads. This isn't just a record, it's like a window into the soul of 1972 America. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get a quick snapshot of what 1972 was like and take a look at the big anxieties gripping the nation. Then, we're going to zoom in on this wild scheme called Dare to Be Great, see how the legal system had to scramble to stop it, and finally, we'll talk about the echoes of that past that, we can still hear today. Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine we're peeling back the first page of this old document. What was going on in the world on this one day, October 6, 1972, at least as seen through the eyes of Congress? Right away, you can just feel the weight of these huge global tensions. You've got debates raging over the SALT nuclear arms treaty with the Soviets. You've got these heated arguments about how much foreign aid costs and if it's even a good idea. And of course, the Vietnam War is just this massive shadow over everything, with these really emotional pleas about American prisoners of war. All of this is happening with this backdrop of serious economic strain. I mean, the country was facing its first big trade deficit in almost 80 years. And wow, this quote from Congressman Henry Helstosky, it just perfectly captures the mood. He's talking about the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco, a moment that was filled with so much hope for world peace. But by 72, he's saying all that optimism was just gone, replaced by disillusionment, fear. You can really feel just how somber the vibe was. And that anxiety wasn't just about what was happening on the world stage, it was hitting really close to home too. So let's look at what was going on inside the country, as reflected in this one day's record. This description from Congressman Michael Harrington is just so vivid. He's painting this picture of American fishing boats, old, totally outdated, literally struggling to stay afloat against these huge modern foreign fishing fleets. And you realize this isn't just about fishing. It's a symbol of this much deeper economic anxiety, this feeling that traditional American industries were just getting left behind in a world that was changing way too fast. And really, the fears were coming from every direction. You had environmental crises making headlines, like mining waste getting dumped into Lake Michigan. There was this deep, deep fear of crime, of drug abuse. The economy was this constant worry with inflation and government debt just ballooning. And maybe the most telling thing of all, a study showed that people's trust in their own government was in a free fall. The whole country just felt unsettled. So you have this climate of economic anxiety, right? And this growing distrust. It turns out that's the absolute perfect breeding ground for a new kind of problem. And that sets the stage for a very specific story that exploded out of this moment, a huge get-rich-quick operation called Dare to Be Great. Before we meet the guy behind all this, let's just make sure we're on the same page about what a pyramid scheme actually is. Basically, it's a scam that totally depends on a never-ending flow of new recruits paying to get in. The folks at the top get rich off the money from the people at the bottom. But here's the thing. Eventually, you run out of new people, the whole pyramid collapses, and almost everyone loses every penny. And here he is, the mastermind, Glenn Turner. He was this incredibly charismatic, totally flamboyant character, part motivational speaker, part circus showman. He came from a sharecropper family and basically sold himself as living proof that anyone, and he meant anyone, could get rich. He was flying around in private jets, wearing flashy clothes, holding these massive rallies where he promised to share all his secrets to success. So the model was simple, and that's what made it so dangerously appealing. Step one, you pay thousands of dollars just to get in the door. That money bought you a set of motivational tapes and books, but the real goal wasn't selling that stuff. Nope. The only way you could make your money back and hopefully get rich was to go out and recruit more people to also invest thousands of dollars. It was a textbook pyramid scheme, just dressed up in the language of positive thinking and self-improvement. Well, as you can imagine, this couldn't last forever. Eventually, regulators started to catch on. But actually stopping Glenn Turner wasn't so easy. Turns out his whole operation exposed a major loophole in the law, which forced the courts to get pretty creative. And here was the big legal problem. For the government to prosecute Turner for fraud, they had to prove that what he was selling wasn't just some motivational tapes. They had to prove it was an investment contract, which is a type of security, kind of like a stock or a bond. The question was, did Dare to Be Great actually fit the legal definition at the time?
Okay, so the legal standard back then was something called the Howey test, which came from a Supreme Court case way back in 1946. It basically said something is an investment contract if people invest money in a shared business, expecting profits to come solely from what other people do. Now, Dare to Be Great clearly checked the first two boxes, but that third one, that one little word, solely, that was the problem. Turner's lawyers argued that since the investors had to go out and actively recruit people, they were working for their money. It was a really clever defense, and it almost worked. But the court saw right through it. In what turned out to be a landmark decision, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decided to look past that tricky word solely and instead focused on redefining what a common enterprise really means. And here it is, the brand new, much broader definition. The court said, look, it doesn't matter if an investor does some of the work. What really matters is whether their financial success is fundamentally tied up with the efforts of the people promoting the scheme. This ruling was an absolute game changer. It slammed that loophole shut for good and created the legal tool that's used to prosecute pyramid schemes to this very day. So let's zoom back out. We started with this dry government document from one single day in 1972. We uncovered a whole nation's anxieties, and we saw how those anxieties fueled a massive fraud. So why does this whole journey into the past even matter now? Because the echoes are just unmistakable. The distrust in government from 1972, it's deepened into this much broader crisis of faith in all of our institutions. The concerns about pollution back then have morphed into the global challenge of climate change. The economic instability of the 70s feels a lot like our own market volatility. And Glenn Turner's pyramid scheme? It feels like the direct ancestor to all the sophisticated digital scams we see online today. The technology is different, sure, but the underlying anxieties and human vulnerabilities, they're eerily similar. And all of this kind of leaves us with one final thought. We just unpacked the story hidden inside a single day from 1972. It really makes you wonder, if someone 50 years from now were to pull up the digital records of today, our social media posts, our news headlines, our debates, what story would all of that tell about us? What would they learn about our hopes, our fears, and the challenges we are facing? It's a pretty powerful thing to think about.